geese are really intimidating.
And sexy. But anyway, we both like to be better dancers, put it that way.
I'm just a bit ashamed of myself. Yo, what's going on, guys? Reese here from MoreThanLifting.com. This is the MoreThanLifting Podcast with myself and Chris Thatcher.
Hello.
Hello, sorry, I think I talked over you saying hello. Do you want to try again?
Hello.
Oh, that's just, yeah, so guys, it's all about training. We're personal trainers talking to you about what we're doing to experiment with our training, how to integrate that into your own fitness lifestyle. And yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. So this is episode 1. We're talking about movement fundamental preparations and stuff like that, which is all about getting your body ready for more extreme training. You know, it's a lot of people who haven't trained for a while are going to have very stiff joints and very weak and underactive muscles. So it's important before you start anything heavy to start light and just to get used to moving around again. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about today, I think. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, that's spot on, mate. Yeah, just really, you know, if you're coming from a place where you haven't trained much recently, if you're coming from a place where you haven't really trained at all in your adult life, you know, whatever it might be, we're going to just give you some very basic ideas of what you can do, and a lot of what we talk about will need some sort of visual cue to it as well, so we'll make sure that you kind of know where to find that stuff on our social feeds on YouTube and Instagram respectively, to make sure you can kind of attach the actual visual of this. So we'll try and share some stuff in terms of movements and what they should look like in an audio setting, but you know, we'll also try and give you the visual links as well to kind of back that up. But yeah, it's really just about getting you from whatever your current zero is, your baseline, to look at your fundamental movement patterns, you know, really trying to, as Reece said, re-engage lazy or inactive muscles, you know, move joints through their full range of motion, make sure that you're laying the best possible foundation to avoid any sort of risk of injury, and also just give you your greatest performance returns when you actually start progressing your training to a higher level.
Sounds exciting. Does
sounds exciting.
It is super important though, and I tell you, it can actually be really fun. Like, this is the kind of thing where you can try out all the weird little like animal movement type stuff and forward rolls and like you know, all just little movements that you used to do when you were a kid and that you just don't do anymore, just to help get all your joints moving, all your muscles working together. So like, it does sound really exciting, but it actually is really exciting, and it can actually be really good fun too.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, most of what we talk about is derived from various different forms of movement, various different forms of training: yoga, Pilates, you know, basic strength conditioning drills, athletic drills, gymnastics drills, you know, everything kind of mine and Reece's scope in terms of what we've read, what we've studied, what we've implemented in our own training over the years have been drawn from a variety of different sources. You know, we're not CrossFit, we're not yogis, we're not pure gymnastics, we're not pure Olympic lifting, pure gym-based training. It's all taking the best elements we possibly can to create the best movement practice for ourselves, and obviously hope to help you guys build that for yourselves as well. So this is a lot of what we talk about may sound kind of familiar if you do any of those particular things, if you do yoga regularly, if you actually take part in any sort of gymnastics classes or gymnastics club. If you actually just go to the gym, you may see people doing things around, or may have had a trainer yourself in the past that really drilled in to mobilization and preparatory drills as part of your program. So some of it may be familiar, some of it may sound new, but you know, this isn't coming from one place. You know, we're drawing on the best of our experiences, the best of our knowledge from a variety of different sources to help you, as I say, build your best movement practice. So, where are we going to start?
Just as a little side note, I'd really like to learn to dance, you know.
You'd really like to learn to dance?
Yeah. Well, I think you went through the list of all the stuff, and I thought, man, I wish we could have stuck dance in there. But I'm terrible at dancing. It's really embarrassing, actually. I'm one of those, like...
I find that, I reckon you've got rhythm, though, because I know, you know, full disclosure to everyone, both Reece and I are musicians, or you know, relatively musically capable. Whether or not you'd call us any good or not is another thing entirely, but we both have a deep vested interest in music, either performing or listening to, and I'm sure you've got a sense of rhythm about things, you know.
And music's not an issue, but like when it comes to my body, I'm just like I don't know, I feel awkward, you know. I feel proper awkward.
I can't believe that you train as much as you do, you have the movement capacity that you do, and you like music, so you have a sense of rhythm, you produce music, so you have a sense of rhythm, and yet you don't think you can dance. I'd love to put that to the theory.
It's one of those things where I'm just a bit ashamed of myself dancing. So I just, anything I'd be able to like learn to dance, and then I'd be able to use that what I've learned as like a template for how I dance. But because I've never like learned anything, I was never like going out clubbing or anything when I was young. I was like into metal and shit. So I like as a kid I never really danced. The extent of my dance is either running around a circle or wobbling my head about. So now, as I've grown up, I just never started dancing. I feel a bit like Billy Elliot. I feel like I'm trapped, like I'm a dancer stuck in a not dancer's body, and I feel I need to let it out and express.
You need to unleash the dancer within.
Yeah.
Well, maybe look, that could be another. We've talked about doing videos for our training experiences. Maybe I should take a club in sometime, and we'll get some videos of that. No,
that'd be so funny.
I'm no dancer, I'll be honest. One of the things I really want to get into is more couples-based dancing. But myself and my girlfriend have talked about going and doing like salsa and ballroom and things like that, because I think that choreography and that combination of not just working with your own body but working with someone else's, I think is hugely inspiring. I think that's something that everyone would benefit from learning for in terms of getting closer in your relationship. I think that's one thing that a lot of people would say, especially we see people doing it when they get older, they get into their 50s and 60s and start going dancing together, and it's almost like they're reconnecting on some level. So I think doing some of that sort of stuff when you're younger and maybe earlier on in a relationship, I think sets a really good foundation. But anyway, we're not
It'd be a really fun date, wouldn't it? Like just a random salsa class.
Oh mate, it'd be great, especially if you don't actually, look, if you're you could play it one or two ways. If you happen to be a really good salsa dancer and you kind of got a few lessons in the bag, and you can take a date along as a guy, and you can
the
spin
first
around
date
a bit.
or the first time you try it, you'll be terrible, and that'll be great because you'll be so bad. You'll both be able to laugh at yourself. It'd be hilarious. And then maybe a couple of dates in, or a couple of girls in, if you're one of them, you'd have a couple of skills you could like throw out on the side as well, and you'd just be like I wish you could see me right now.
You dancing around your room.
Oh mate, it's embarrassing. So
you could throw down some skills, or you could, as you say, the sort of shared vulnerability is, I think it's great whether you're in a new relationship or an extended one. But anyway, I don't know how.
This does apply to what we're saying a little bit. I'm gonna wrap it up now.
Yeah, but anyway, we both like to be better dancers. Put it that way.
Like if you can't move properly, if your body is seized up and stiff, or just hasn't been worked properly, you're never going to be that good at dancing, and that's a fact. So you need to start moving before you start dancing, before you start taking all the girls out, because otherwise you won't be able to learn how to salsa. You won't have the coordination, you won't have the initial mobility and a processing power in your head to be able to do the movements, let alone move someone else about like you would do with salsa or something like that. So it definitely applies to dancing, fitness, and that's a fact.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like you said in our first episode, we want to try and encourage you to play with movement as well. We want this to not be overly regimented. There's a necessity for keeping things structured and following a process to some extent, but also trying to enjoy what you're doing as well, because if there's no enjoyment in what you're doing, if there's no sense of fulfillment and achievement around what you're actually doing, then there's very little point, because you're never going to progress beyond a certain level, because you need that entertainment value. And if dancing is some way of keeping you moving regularly, then great. It's maybe not for everyone, and please, just the only place I draw the line is Zumba classes, but beyond that, embrace the kind of the years and years of kind of experience that have been passed down through dance instructors, because any good instructor especially will teach you how to kind of loosen yourself up properly and warm up into the process, and again just get yourself moving. Why not have fun with it? Enjoy your movement practice, whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. And there needs to be a practice as well, I think. If you're just training for the sake of training, or if you just go down, because that's how most guys start, I think. They just want biceps, or they want to make their chest a bit bigger, because you start going out and you realize that all the older guys look a lot better than you do, you scrawny little bastard. So I think that's the way a lot of people get into it, and then they get stuck in that bigger biceps, bigger chest kind of frame of mind. But if you have a reason to be training, if you have something that you're like a hobby that develops out of it, like for me doing gymnastics is exactly that, then you develop a passion around something else, and your training is a conduit to improvement in that field rather than being training for the sake of training, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I say it all the time, you know, vanity is a great gateway into fitness. You know, because most of us get into training in one way, shape or another, because we want to maybe, especially as guys, you know, we want to, as Rui said, put on a bit of muscle, look a little bit bigger, feel a bit more confident in our bodies.
Well, look good naked, mate. That's what it is. You want to look good naked.
Yeah, look good naked. You know, you want to kind of be able to impress as soon when the clothes come off. But you know, that can be a gateway. That can be a way and a means by which that gets people into the idea of exercise. And we see that nowadays more than ever. You know, more and more people are connecting with the idea of going to the gym, predominantly at a younger age, because they want to just get laid. You know, they want to look leaner and fitter, and you know, I mean, everyone wants to get laid, but you know, the priorities change somewhat as you get into later life. You know, it becomes about the aesthetic, but it also becomes about the function and the performance and the energy and all those other aspects. But fundamentally, if you know, you just want to be in better shape, look better, and feel more confident in your own skin, then great. You know, let's find something that's going to work for you. And yeah, hopefully, what we're sharing with you will give you the insight into not only is this going to make you look better, but it's going to make you function and work and feel better. Ahead of so much more as well. It'll
make you look better when you're older. Definitely.
Which is really important, because no one wants to look saggy and out of shape when they're old. I mean, you still. Well, there's no excuse. I saw a great Instagram feed of some lady who was, you know, she's obviously done, I think, sort of gymnastics and yoga, and I can't remember who she was on Instagram, but she's in her like 70s. Yeah. And you know, she would put girls in their 20s and 30s to shame. You know, she was ripped. You know, and okay, maybe she overplayed the tan a little bit, and you know, maybe the hair was a little bit too big. You know, she was American and it was a bit overplayed, but you know, in terms of her actual physique, and you could tell that she could move as well, then great. You know, because we don't want to accept that, you know, we have to be saggy and weak and in pain constantly past, you know, the age of 50 or 60 or, you know, 70. You know, there's so much more capacity, so much more quality of life we can enjoy nowadays based on what we understand versus our parents and our grandparents' generation and beyond. So, you know, that's the life we should all be aspiring to live. You know, not people always think about living as long as they can, but they don't think of living as well as they can throughout that period. You know, and everyone will make a joke about, well, as soon as someone else is wiping my ass for me, you know, put me in the ground. And it's like, well, yeah, but maybe
you don't need to get to that point.
Yeah, exactly. Let's try and delay that as long as we can. And that's not just about training. That's about, you know, nutrition and stress management and lifestyle quality. But hell, I think we're going to be in danger of diversifying our topic again a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to go on a ramble then, but I decided not to in advance. I'm self-censoring my ramble for later on. So
2 episodes in, you're already controlling yourself. That's great.
I know, yeah. And I've only sworn once.
Yeah, indeed. But you said AIDS in the last episode, which, you know...
AIDS isn't a swear word.
Well, it depends on who you are, I suppose.
Okay, yeah. So, anyway, movement fundamental preparation, getting ready to train, getting into the flow of movement and training. Like, I like this term movement, but every time I say it, I feel like I'm talking about like toilet hygiene, you know? So, which sucks because it's such an important, like, like that is the right word. It's not training, it's developing movements, it's developing movement potential in your body. Like,
see, now you've done it to me. All I can think about is toilet movements. Thank you for that.
It's okay. Yeah, so when you start training, you can't just throw yourself in the deep end, because you'll injure yourself, you'll injure someone else, you'll be the bottom end of a fail video. Like, there's lots of things that could go wrong. You want to be in a good state where you can come to training and get results without hurting yourself, without risking injury, and that starts with very basic mobility work, not lifting. Yeah?
Yeah, I agree. Fundamentally, that is exactly where people need to start.
Yeah. So how do you do it, Chris?
How do we do it? So, well, let's start very low-level stuff first. And I'm not sure how much you do this in your own training, but one of the sort of key beginning points that I would start most clients with is I get them to get a foam roller. Do you use one at all?
I use I've got a foam roller, but I find it's not like I find it's really difficult to do.
Right.
And that maybe I'm just being a bit silly, but I find it a bit awkward. I do have a really nice one for my back. It's like a trapezium,
Okay.
and that's really good. Just I got that from my chiropractor just to like help me set my back in. I find like lying on that's really nice.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
So is that what, just extend, so you can extend your spine?
Yeah. So I can get the correct arch in my lower spine.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Well, foam rolling has a variety of purposes beyond the spine. It's something that's come from into the sort of more conventional training world from physiotherapy and chiropractic medicine. Essentially, it's just having a cylindrical block of foam which you use for what we call self-myofascial release, which is self-massage. So all you're doing is essentially trying to iron out the knots and creases and the build-up of tension through particularly the fascia, but also the larger muscle, the fascia being the skin that sits across, the tissue that sits across most of your primary muscles, and just trying to loosen out anything which may be a little bit knotted and tight, because that will allow, first and foremost, you to stretch and elongate your muscles, contract and extend more appropriately. So I won't go into the various foam rolling drills now. You can do predominantly any muscle group in the body. You can use a foam roller, or you can use hardball techniques using a tennis ball, a cricket ball, a golf ball in some respects.
I was going to say tennis ball is quite popular as well, I think, as an alternative.
Yeah, well, it's really easy to get hold of, but if you go to any sort of physiotherapy equipment stockist, or any sort of gym equipment stockist, more often than not you can get sort of rubber black hard balls that tend to work a little bit better because they're not as slippery, so they don't kind of slip out from underneath you when you're actually sitting on them doing your glutes or your calves. But there's a variety of different techniques and exercises you can use a foam roller for, but I do recommend it because not only can it help to de-dense, so to speak, certain elements of tissue, trying to take out the knots and the complexities that have built up over time, just through lack of activity, or maybe even previous injuries. There may be build up of scar tissue that you can break down from a tear or a strain or something that you created earlier in life. And that essentially lays a good foundation, because that allows you to then, when you're doing stretches, to feel immediately like you can move just that little bit more freely. It just opens your body up. It gets the blood flowing as well, because you're already moving around a little bit by virtue of doing the rolling. So you're getting some blood flow and some heat into your key muscle groups and around your joints as well. So use that, use a foam roller. Google it if you're not sure what a foam roller is. Go onto YouTube, type foam rolling drills, have a look at my Instagram feed at Coach Thatch. Honestly, there's an abundance of stuff out there. You won't go short for finding out what a good foam rolling or hardball rolling drill is. But it's a great thing to start getting into, because you can do it at home. You can do it around your workouts if you don't have time before your workouts. If you're doing it later on in the day, every evening, while you're watching EastEnders or whatever your evening practice may be in terms of relaxation, rather than just sitting still, you can be sitting on a foam roller and moving around a little bit. So that will kind of make you feel a lot more comfortable than being curled up in a ball or in a really weird, awkward position on a sofa. Just kind of integrate that wherever you possibly can, because it's a fantastic tool to start using. Then from there, we would progress into more mobility-based drills and the more specific prep drills. So do you want to pick up on a couple, Reece? I've spoken for a little while, and I'll duck in when I need to.
Okay, yeah. So I think a lot of basic warm-up and stretching exercises are perfect to help with your mobility. And I think a lot of more complex joints, and not your elbow, I'm talking like your shoulder and your hips, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of muscles that wrapping around each other and tying themselves up, and there's a lot of bone and sinew getting in the way. So it's very important to get moving, get your shoulders moving, get your hips moving, do deep or as good a squat as you can, get low, get high, stretch up, stretch down, do some twisty movements. It's very important just to move your body as much as you can, because otherwise you stiffen up, and that's why people really struggle with exercise now, and obesity is such a problem for with people, because it's very difficult for you to get out of that when you can't move your joints properly. It's very hard to move because your joints don't work, and they are literally the hinges of your body. You need these things to be working well. It's very important. Mobility, I literally can't stress it enough. Mobility is so important. Yeah, and I'm lucky because I'm naturally quite flexible, so I've never had a lot of stress when it comes to moving my body. Yes, since doing gymnastics and since actively working on my mobility, it has increased phenomenally, and there's no point of no return. It's never too late to start working on your mobility, because unless you are literally stuck in place, or you have that degenerative bone disease where your cartilage grows into bone, and you know, there is no excuse. Your body is made to move. Moving is beneficial for you. It makes you happier, it makes you healthier, and it'll really improve your lifestyle. So basic shoulder stretches and movement, like swinging them around in circles, bringing your knees up and turning them out your hips and stuff like that, and just moving your body in every direction that you can. Sounds silly, and when you do it, you might feel like a bit of a goose, but that's okay, because geese are really intimidating. So, you know, just bear that in mind. But yeah, so
I didn't see that coming.
Before you come into stretch, I don't know where that just come out. Before you even get into stretching, it's good to just move yourself around to help set your bones and your joints in place. And because if you just jump into stretching, you can potentially your bones aren't necessarily in their fixed position, their natural resting state. If you just get out of bed, or if you've not moved around a lot, everything can be sitting kind of out of line, and you have to shake yourself up a little bit to get everything in place. So before you even start stretching, let alone lifting any weights or doing some handstands or pull-ups or anything, if you do that kind of stuff like me, which is much cooler, by the way, guys, then yeah, get moving, get your joints working. Try and, like I say, move in every direction that you can, whether it's a forward roll or a backwards roll, or whether you're just swinging your arms about like a windmill. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just important to move before. It's like a walking before you can run, you know. Before you can do extreme movement, you have to do very basic, simple movement, because it literally prepares you to do the crazy stuff.
Yeah, completely. And you know, a traditional myth has always been, you know, you don't need to be flexible or mobile to be strong. You know, and the perfect example is a lot of, I guess you'd say, powerlifters, or, you know, any average lifter in the gym. You know, we've all seen the guy who can, you know, bench press double his body weight, but he can't lift his arms above his head. Yeah. And you know, that's fine if your goal in life is just to have the biggest possible bench you can. But
how do you apply that? That's well, you know.
Exactly, and that's fine. Like, again, it's a goal. You know, upping your bench press is a goal. You know, I would like to have a bigger bench press. It's something that, because of my body type and my lever length, my arm length, it's kind of a harder thing for me to accomplish a really big bench press compared to other people. And because I'm so obsessed with doing it with good technique, you know, I don't want these kind of half little reps or these silly, you know, partial reps where you're barely even dropping the bar to the chest. I want a nice full range of motion. I'm obsessed with that. You know, that's kind of something that I apply to everything I do. But you can have strength and mobility, strength and suppleness in the right sort of ratios. And we'll talk about stamina as a tag onto that as well further down the line. But, you know, try and bear in mind that actually you can make the argument that, okay, well, you've got, you know, double your body weight bench press. So let's say you're an 80 kilo guy and you're able to bench press for your 1 rep max 160 kilos. Then that's great. But if you can't lift your arms above your head, then there's no functional benefit to the training that you're doing. You know, somewhere down the line, you are going to have, at the very least, a shoulder impingement. At the very worst, as Reese alluded to, some sort of degenerative ailments with your shoulder. You know, that's going to happen. There's going to be a trade-off somewhere where something snaps, because it's like winding a guitar string. You know, you keep winding all that tension in one direction, and with bench press, more often than not, it is. You know, very rarely do you see guys do good form on posterior chain movements like pull-ups or rows or dumbbell rows, or, you know, any sort of movement where they're kind of activating their sort of more tonic muscles at the back of their body. So a lot of the time it becomes about those very aesthetic muscles at the front, you know, your chest, your biceps, the ones you can see in the mirror, the ones that you think, you know, get the most attention and make you feel the best about yourself. And again, I've said about vanity being a gateway. Great, you know, that's a good way to start, to get you into training, to get you into focusing on your body and getting, you know, a bit more control there. But why not have double the bench press and be able to lift your arms above your head? why not actually even consider the fact that you might be able to get a bigger bench press if you can move more functionally, and you're not going to get the risk of injury later in life as well. So it's all about trying to go low risk, high reward. And sometimes the more you mitigate the risk, the more you reduce the risk of any given thing, the higher the reward will actually be. You'll actually get a greater return. It's not just about going in and focusing on one particular thing all the time. It's trying to have a very holistic, meso viewpoint of your training. And we alluded to it in the last episode about having periodization and cyclical training, you know, dropping something in, taking something out, putting other things in and around that you maybe otherwise haven't tried at that point, or having a very specific goal for a short period of time, whether it's 1 month, a quarter, or even that year. You know, have a bigger view of what you're doing. Try and think, you know, what's the lifetime value of the training I'm doing right now, and not just in terms of can I get my bench press up in 6 months, or can I do more pull-ups, or can I squat a little bit better, or can I get a planche in, or can I do some ring work better, or get a muscle up. But you know, what's my body, what's my functionality going to be like in the latter stages of my life? You know, what's my lifetime journey going to look like in terms of movement and fitness? So it's so important to try and understand that this is the absolute core of what fitness is. Just move. Just, you know, they didn't have barbells and dumbbells and things like that when we were growing up in the forest and the mountains, and you know, human beings were evolving to their current physical state that we now live in. You know, they didn't have that stuff, but they just moved. You know, they tested their body by climbing over things and walking around things and under things and climbing up things, and just, you know, trying to test their muscles in a way that it would otherwise not be tested if you just sat in a chair all day long. So, but what came with that, just by virtue of moving, even not having a particular structure to it, was those joints, those muscles, you know, all that connective tissue, everything was functioning together as a unit. There was a much greater degree of functionality to everything that was being done. But movement as a fundamental basis for what we're talking about is so key here. Anyway,
absolutely.
Sorry, my little,
no,
my
that's
little
okay. It's okay. It's important. And I think back to what you were saying about your bench press. Where people aren't doing the full range of motion, they're not getting as great a benefit as they would if they were doing the full range of motion. So if you improve, most people, who just go down the gym and lift weights, will see a massive improvement in their strength and their muscle size if they work on, instead of increasing the weight, work on their range of motion. They'll have much better definition in their bodies, they'll have much better physique all round, and it'll help even out parts of their body by working on that, having that mentality, that movement focus rather than weight and size focus. I found that personally from doing bodyweight stuff, that it's necessary to work the full range of motion. And when you do, and when you go for consistently good full repetitions, then the need to increase the load is almost non-existent.
Yeah,
that's what definitely. I find anyway.
And like we talked about in the last episode, you know, the sort of minimum effective dose of things. You know, how much do you have to lift? You know, how strong do you have to be to perform certain things and to be healthy and functionally strong within that particular movement? You know, just
it's not
what
a lot.
Level do you have? No,
it's not a lot.
Exactly. No, but you will get there quicker if you can move better, and your body as a unit, as a combination of muscles, not just one. It's not just about, and this, you know, this is where the bodybuilding world kind of, you know, most conventional training up until this point. It's really weird when you look at things, and I'm going to go off on one again, so sorry about this, but when you look
apologies
at things
in advance, guys. Chris is rambling.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Like, what you got to remember, like, imagine if. So one of the reasons that, you know, conventional gym training is done the way it is very much because of traditional sort of gym-based stuff back in the 50s, 60s and 70s, the bodybuilding movement. Yeah. Now imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger had been the same person he is, but he'd been a gymnast. What I mean by that is he popularized bodybuilding to the level it is because he looked so ripped, and he really played on the aesthetic, and he'd talk about how it helped him get girls, and then people saw how he became successful in movies because it was all based on his physique.
Yeah.
You know, it was all based on how
it wasn't
he
the
looked.
accent, that's for sure.
Well, that probably helped to some extent. You know, I'm sure it was a bit of an aphrodisiac for some people. But the key thing is, you know, if he'd followed a similar journey down, but gone through a gymnastics route, you know, if he'd become like some Eastern European hotshot in gymnastics, but he still had his same personality, you know, he'd still gone out there and, you know, said, look at me, I'm the toughest guy in gymnastics, and gymnastics is great because blah blah. If he, you know, people underestimate just how important he and other key people in the bodybuilding movement were in popularizing gym-based training.
Yeah.
And for decades now, even now, people are still working off stuff that was on Arnie's program back in the 70s. You still see people doing Arnie presses, and if he'd popularized gymnastics in the same way he'd popularized bodybuilding, I'm not saying it was all Arnold Schwarzenegger.
We're not blaming
there's a multitude of other things.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, sorry, Arnie. We're not blaming you.
No,
it's not your
at all.
fault personally, but you fucked it up, man. You fucked it up for everyone.
No, even that's a bit too harsh. It's very much the fact that he popularized training. He just popularized a particular style of training.
Because that's what he was doing. It's not because like you say, it's not there's no particular bias. It's not because it's just what he was doing. So people have emulated that because of the success that he had in not just in his fitness, but the other facets, like because he became a household name. Everyone knows who Arnold Schwarzenegger is, and it's all derived from him essentially putting the work in his fitness and working on his physique. Yeah. And what we're saying is if he had still had that public personality, but he was doing a different form of training, then it would be more or just as likely that form of training would be super popular or more popularized now than it is just because of Arnie's influence on fitness.
Well, exactly. I mean,
which has been massive, and you can't dispute it. And the guy is prolific and phenomenal.
Oh yeah, look, he's an inspiration, and he's become a bit of a walking contradiction in recent years, and a very obvious politician after his years in office. But he popularized training, as I said, and he popularized that particular style. And let's go to another extreme. If it had been yoga, he would have made yoga. Yoga is not something that guys look at and go, I have to do yoga. They're starting to tap into it.
Yeah, but now, instead, in Arnie's time, people were making songs about people who weren't into yoga.
Yes.
And they were alienated because they were into yoga and they thought it was stupid or silly. Maybe not stupid, that's a bit extreme, I guess. But that it wasn't as relevant or as important as people were trying to teach, like yogis were trying to teach people then, which we now know to be true, and that yoga is super awesome.
Well, it just became, bodybuilding became sexy, because it was massively marketed. You had some real strong characters at the forefront of it, Arnie being the most obvious one. And I don't want to bang on this too hard, but the point of the matter is that everything that people do in the gym now is based around that. They certainly didn't do back in the day. I know, actually, to be fair, a lot of professional bodybuilders, natural bodybuilders, they understand, like we've just said, the benefit of actually doing good, solid prep work. And they can actually be, some of them, not all of them, quite mobile and very athletic in a performance sense in terms of what they can do from a movement perspective. They're not the guys that can't lift their arms above their head. They understand actually to get the next level of definition, to get the next level of aesthetic quality to their body, if they can lift their arms just that little bit higher when they're presenting, if they can twist and contort. Look at, if you watch Pumping Iron with Arnie, it starts with him in a ballet class or with a ballet instructor who's teaching him how to pose. And that stuff has carried through to some extent, whereas people understand that if they can move better when they're performing in bodybuilding competitions and physique competitions, then, and a lot of a lot of physique athletes now, a lot of physique performance people are personal trainers, fitness coaches who come from it from a scientific background. Not all, but again, some do. So what we've got to realise is what we believe to be the best route now is more often than not, like a lot of things in life, is kind of what was more heavily mass marketed at a point, at that inflection point in our cultural evolution. What was the key go-to thing, the one that was most popularized at a time. And if it had been, let's say, gymnastics, as sad as it is to kind of look back, and maybe this is the inflection point now where gymnastics is becoming, gymnastic strength, calisthenics training, these are becoming the sort of sexy, cool things. Even the guys doing outdoor workouts in like the US, like on the playground frames and things like that, doing all their body weight training as well, one arm pull-ups and stuff, which is kind of derived from basic calisthenics and gymnastic stuff. That's becoming pretty cool and sexy now because it's got a bigger audience on things like YouTube and various other platforms as well. So maybe that's the transition now, but that could have happened 30 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And it was around 30 years ago. It's not like a new thing. It was around before that,
It just wasn't made to be as sexy and as popular.
Yeah, and that's all right. and we're here to fix that.
Indeed we are. Anyway, sorry, I just thought that was kind of relevant because
it was absolutely relevant, and like we know, like you say, it's something that's sometimes the stuff that makes stuff popularized highlights latter generations highlights other issues with our approach to it. So like you say with your bodybuilding, everyone comes at the gym going, oh, I need to lift loads of weight, and they don't focus on the other parts, which are kind of in the background. For Arnie, he was doing all that, but he just wasn't showing it because all you see is the big muscles and him doing like 60 kilo curls or whatever. Do you know what I mean? On just one arm, like just stupid stuff like that. And that's what people see, and so that's the influence that it has on people. But flexibility and mobility is just as important as strength.
But
if not more, because if you can't move your joints, then the fuck is the point in having big muscles for? You know, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
You look massive, but what's the point of that if you just can't even walk?
What can you do? You know what I mean? If you can't put your hands above your head, frankly, it's embarrassing that you've let yourself get to that state. Like, look, respect your body, look after it. That's what we preach. So make sure that you're doing the work. If you're working on it, make sure you're doing the work that is actually going to benefit you and is not going to put you in a hole later on and open yourself up for injury. So back to the prep side, before you do any strength work or any endurance work, before you go on a run, before you do handstands, before you do anything, do a little bit of mobility, get your joints in place, but then stretch out your muscles, get them prepared for exercise. If you just throw yourself in to something like weightlifting, you're asking for trouble, because the leverage and the stress that it puts on not just your muscles but your joints as well, like is asking for trouble. It's putting yourself in a position where you are going to injure yourself. It might not be today, it might not be 3 weeks, a year, 3 years, 5 years, but you're going to injure yourself, and it's going to seriously do some serious damage.
Yeah, definitely.
I self-censored again, and I swore so much.
That's all right. You're doing pretty well so far.
I think I've been alright, yeah.
Yeah, the key thing is, and just sort of to try and wrap this up, because I know we have been riffing for quite a while on this particular topic, is, it's not just about, what conventional forms of flexibility may have been, doing the static stretches. I remember being at school and, before we went off on a sprint or a long run, we'd all just be kind of doing very static, very elongating stretches, which didn't really serve to help what we were about to do, because it stretched us out, but it didn't really move the joints. It didn't get the muscle used to contracting and expanding, extending in equal measure. So this is where we use more conventional forms of mobility. And as I say, you can check out both my Instagram and Reese's Instagram at Coach Thatch or MoreThanLifting to get a better understanding of what we mean by mobility drills. We'll put more stuff up there consistently as we go, but there's already stuff there, and on YouTube at MoreThanLifting. But if you want to go and check out some really cool mobility drill examples, go over to mobilitywod.com, which is Kelly Starrett, who is the author of a book called How to Be a Supple Leopard, which is a great insight into just movement fundamentals. It's quite a heavy textbook, so I'm not saying go and get the book, but go and have a look at what we mean by functional mobilization, whether everything from foam rolling to hard balls to doing movements which give you the most bang for your buck. So one of my personal favorite examples of good mobility is doing a squat stand, which is effectively standing with your feet shoulder width apart, bending forward, grabbing your feet, and then dropping into a squat while still holding your feet. Arms sit inside the knees, so you're effectively looking like you're in a frog position. You look a bit like a frog. And then from there, you stand back up to as high as you can without letting go of the feet. So in that movement, you're moving your ankles, your knees, and your hips, and also you're moving your lower back as well. There's a degree of flexion and extension through the lumbar spine there,
and your shoulders,
everything. In that movement alone, most of the major joints in your body and even most of the major muscle groups are getting some degree of stretch or mobilization, movement through a range of motion, and just moving through that position. So squatting down, hands on the feet, standing up with the hands on the feet, going to the highest level of the stretch that you can, so you feel that stretch through the back of the legs, the hamstrings, the lower back, and obviously building up to a point where you can stand with your knees pretty much locked out, with you still holding onto your feet. I know for a lot of people, just bending forward and touching their toes can be a real battle. That is a great drill to improve that. And what it also does is it kind of preps your legs and your lower body, and also through your core and upper body as well, to do something a little bit more explosive immediately afterwards, because it's a dynamic preparation movement. It's not just a static stretch, it's a dynamic movement that complements the other work that you're about to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another one for flexibility as well, while we're on it, and mobility is like, I don't know, bodyweight, we just call them like Romanian deadlifts, is it?
Yes.
I don't know. But basically, you're like craning it on one leg, your other leg goes straight back up, and you bring your arms straight down to touch your toes.
Oh, you mean a single leg deadlift?
A single leg deadlift.
Single leg Romanian deadlift. Romanian deadlift would be a stiff leg deadlift.
Yeah,
with
stiff
a bar.
leg deadlift. Yeah. So, but in body weight terms, you only do that with one leg, because if you're doing it with two legs, you're just stretching.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Whereas with a weight, obviously, it's increased resistance and it is training your strength more. But so yeah, you doing that with like one leg, it improves your balance, coordination. You know, it works your ability to move in so many ways than just bending over or just like rolling around, you know, or just trying to reach down to the floor, which in turn is something like say touching your toes is something that a lot of people struggle with. But a lot of that isn't joint flexibility, it's muscle tension. So just stretching regularly or starting to stretch regularly will increase your mobility in a very short time if you haven't been training for ages, because you'll have lost a lot of mobility, and you can get it back quickly by elongating and stretching out your muscles properly so that you can move effectively and efficiently, and also at least more so than you were before.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that leads me into the next point, which I think is a good point to kind of wrap up before we talk on for too much longer, but you know, feel free to interject and add some more if you need to.
Sandwiches,
excellent. Okay, thank you. You've completely thrown me now. No, sorry. My point was going to be that I know for a lot of people, and you know, there might be different types of people listening out there. You know, some of you may be very experienced at training. Other people may not have any clue whatsoever and may be kind of stuck at home, stressing and fretting about, you know, how am I going to get rid of this weight? How am I going to reclaim my body? How am I going to get back to some degree of physical activity, or, you know, to get to a level that I've never actually had before? You know, just getting into a routine. I'm sure everyone gets sick and tired of, you know, hearing about their friends that go to the gym and, you know, get PBs, or, you know, they kind of go to yoga every weekend. And I want people like, that's my life, right? That is fundamentally my life, Reese's life. You know, training, movement, you know, activity. It's just a fundamental part of what we do. And what I want people to understand is we still had to start from somewhere. We still had to build up progressively, and I can still get a little bit intimidated. So for example, I'm currently basically teaching myself how to do a snatch, which is, you know, as you will have seen in the Olympics recently, picking the bar up from the floor, throwing it above your head and catching it in an overhead squat position. You know, so it's basically the transference of weight from the floor up over the head as maximally as you possibly can. Now, that more than anything else in a gym or Olympic lifting setting, not allowing for gymnastics training, is one of the best examples of, you know, functional movement capacity, mobilization, flexibility, stability, and strength, and even stamina, because it takes a hell of a lot of strain on the heart and lungs to do that at your maximum capacity. You know, I can get intimidated by that. I'm trying to learn that now, along with some other gymnastic stuff that Reese is helping with as well. And I can feel like an absolute pleb. You know, I'm trying to do this stuff where there's other people around, and I'm like, oh my God, people are watching me. I'm going to drop the bar on my head. I'm going to fall out of the handstand. I'm going to do something that's going to embarrass me. The good thing is, over time, I've learned not to let that affect me so much. You know, I still get it. You know, it's a kind of very primal thing, you know, fight, flight or freeze. You know, we kind of get this fear of judgment and social exclusion because, you know, we want people to accept us and think we're cool and think we're great. And that's a very natural instinct for all of us to have. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what you've got to do is learn to override it a little bit. And I'm using that example because I want you to understand that even with, you know, 15, and it's probably coming up 20 years of training experience, of going to gyms, of doing some sort of movement, some sort of sport. I mean, I've done sport my entire life. You know, I've always been capable in terms of activity, not always the most prolific athlete, but certainly giving it my best. But even I can get intimidated walking into a gym for the first time if I don't know the environment, I don't know the setup. I kind of can be a bit tentative trying to figure things out. And what I want to convey to people, especially those guys out there who are trying to start something for the first time, who are trying to get into training in general, trying to build a new movement practice, get into activity for the very first time, is using, you haven't even got to set foot into a gym. You haven't got to set foot into a yoga class necessarily. You haven't got to go somewhere where you feel immediately outside your comfort zone, because first and foremost, it's a new environment. And then secondly, it's going to be a whole new activity. So first and foremost, I always recommend people get the advice of a coach, get someone who can help them, whether that's someone you go to see or whether it's someone online like Reese and I operate. Get some degree of grounding. Don't just kind of hit up YouTube and go, well, that looks good, that probably works for everyone, so I'll do that. Try and get some high level of guidance around things. But fundamentally, as I would start someone who I think is actually quite intimidated by new environments and new ideas around training, I would say just starting with mobilization, just reclaiming your capacity to move, just to stretch, to mobilize joints, to do a bit of foam rolling, get the blood flowing. Feel like you're building a habit every day by just saying, all I've got to do is get up and do 10-15 minutes of mobilization, stretch work of a morning. That's building a practice, building a habit around actually getting moving every day. And once you start to feel a bit more confident in your ability to move, you should start to feel more confident with your ability to walk into a gym and start doing that stuff in front of other people. You haven't even got to get on the equipment. Christ, if you walk into most gyms nowadays and start doing, relatively intermediate to advanced mobilization drills, a lot of people in there who are lifting heavy weights or caning it on the treadmill or doing other classes don't have that capacity. They'll look at you and go, oh, that must be some sort of gymnast or yogi or someone who's a high level, because I can't bend down and touch my toes. So you can feel safe in that little space that you've created for yourself and then expand out into the wider space as you become more comfortable and more confident. So just doing low-level mobilization and preparatory work in your own time can be a great way of getting you in to some degree of movement practice and building the awareness around your body and building the confidence and the sort of self-esteem around movement that's going to help you progress further forward. So don't always think you have to start by walking into a gym, walking into a gymnastics club, walking into a yoga class. You can start at home, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about in the next episode, the bodyweight strength work and the kind of fundamentals around progressing that stuff, is where you can go beyond what we've talked about today. So
yeah, it's a natural lead on from this.
Definitely, yeah. So there's always the point is there's always something you can do. You can always do something, and you've got to find what that lowest barrier to entry is for you. If it's doing a few stretches at home just to get yourself active, if it's going for a walk, whatever it might be, this is about a lifetime journey. This isn't about what can I do in the next week, the next month, the next year. Start today with wherever you're at, whatever level you're at. What can I make the rest of my life look like? Break it down, make it simple, make it something you can stick to, and just progressively build on it, because the habits will form, the behaviors will multiply, and the confidence will just continue to grow as you go through. It's not going to happen overnight, but over a few years, over a couple of decades, that stuff's going to get stronger and stronger within you.
Yeah, and don't think it'll take a couple of decades either. Like, that is a very long-term strategy. And I know that's not the point you were making then, Chris, at all. Yeah. But don't, it doesn't take long when you start putting the work in consistently, and when you do start giving it your all. The reason a lot of people who go down the gym aren't in good shape is because they don't go down the gym often enough, or they don't put the work in when they're there. They sit around on their phone taking Snapchats and selfies and all that shit. Being able to start at home removes that barrier to entry. Doing mobility stuff prepares your body. It's an easy win for you. It's not very stressful. It's not even as hard as press-ups. You just move in, you're thinking about it, considering what you're doing, being aware, being self-aware enough to say, I'm going to do just a couple of stretches or something. Like you say, it'll do great things for your confidence, for your ability to move, your posture, which then in turn helps balance a lot of hormones and stuff in your body, which might be out of shape and might be aiding you in not training and in being complacent, or not really caring that much about your body and how your and your ability to move or to train, which, as you start to develop that and that flexibility and that mobility, you'll naturally want to start challenging yourself more, because you'll start to see that progression. And the thing about flexibility is, like I was saying about your hips earlier, is because a lot of people's muscles are tight or overactive or underactive, flexibility is very fast to improve, because as soon as you start working those muscles, suddenly they all work again, like as if by magic. And so it's a very quick win, it's a very easy win, and it'll set yourself up for success further down the line when you start doing more extreme stuff. So it's very important, and that's why we've made it our first episode, because it's movement fundamentals. It's preparing to get fit, it's preparing to get strong, getting back in the swing of it, getting back in the mode of training and doing something and being active, like you were saying.
Yeah, fantastic. And, quite simply, guys, your body wants to move. It really does. Don't fight it, And the more you get into a habit of moving, the more you're going to want to move. And to the point that you'll even find yourself sometimes sitting down watching TV thinking, God, I just need to stretch. I need to get the blood flowing. The body you're becoming attuned to it over time. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. But, after a period of time, your body will start to say if it wants to move, if it wants to rest. And you can start listening to it at a greater level, and that's where really smart training starts to play a part, because then you start thinking, well, I know I'm scheduled for a workout today, but my body's telling me it's actually, understand if it's your body or your mind. Sometimes your mind will say, I don't want to train today, because it's just being lazy and it wants to kind of save you from any pain, which is what it's designed to do. It wants to go home and watch Netflix. But, because it's really intrigued by what the next episode of Homeland or, Making a Murderer is. But listen to your body, really tune into that. And if your body says, I'm tired, I'm sore, it's tough today, I'm not saying don't train, but sometimes that's the call to go home and just do some mobilization, or just go for a swim, or go for a walk, do some sort of activity, let the body move, but let it recover from whatever it's trying to deal with, whether it's fighting off a cold, or whether it's just the stress of, the previous 2 or 3 sessions you've done training, or even the previous month, whatever it may be. But listen into that. And if your body says it wants to move, let it move. Just understand what capacity. And if you're having a good day and you think, well, I know the program says, I should only do this much training, but if you're feeling good and you want to go a little bit harder, then, go a little bit harder, push it to that level. If you think you got it in the tank, then go for it. I'm not saying go all out to the point of killing yourself. We're not trying to make you sick or ill or anything like that, but, just be attuned to what's going on physically, not mentally, physically. Try and listen to what your body's asking you to do for it. And over time, just by virtue of moving that little bit more, you will become far more attuned to that process. So, I think that will do us for today. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I think we've basically spoken about moving a lot. It's pretty obvious we're fans of moving, and it's really I think we've beaten into you that it's important enough for you to at least be bored of us beating it into you.
I think we've bludgeoned them with that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Keywords to listen out for in this episode are movement, fundamentals, and sexy. That came up quite a lot.
Yeah. I think so. I think
sexy fundamental movements.
Sexy.
There you go. See, that's what we're all about. Sexy fundamental movements.
Okay, cool. Right. Chris, you know all the words, so I'll let you wrap it up because I always get it wrong. All the words.
Cool. Okay, guys. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us today. If you liked what you've heard, then please do head on over to iTunes to leave a rating and review to help other people find the show. It can be a little bit of good karma for yourself as well, and we will be very, very grateful. We won't turn up and hug you or kiss you or anything. We don't know who you are. It's all very anonymous, but thank you in advance for your support. If you would like to get involved in the show in any way, whether it's to come on and maybe have a chat with us, to share a question or get something answered by us that you'd be intrigued by, then please do feel to reach out to us via our individual websites at MoreThanLifting.com for Reese, CoachThatch.com for myself, or come and message us on social. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube as Coach Thatch and More Than Lifting. And get in touch, get connected. The podcast is only going to be as good as its audience, because as hosts, I'm not quite sure we're the best. So if you guys want to chip in and contribute in any way and help us out, that would be much appreciated. Give us some inspiration to feed off, to give you guys exactly what you're looking for. But anyway, that will do it for
Help
today.
us not suck so much, guys. Send us questions in and get involved so we don't suck as hosts.
Yes, indeed. Less sucking. So, from me, that's all for today. Reese, all good?
Yeah. Keep in touch with yourselves, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.
Did you say keep touching yourselves, guys?
Keep in touch with yourselves.
Oh, keep in touch. I think you said that to me.
It's the same basic principle.
I think you said that to me on a previous call when we were talking, and I took it as keep touching yourself, which afterwards I went away and I was like, did he really say that? But obviously that's the thing you say, and now I understand why you say it. That's cool.
Yeah, so keep in touch with yourselves, guys.
Thank you so much for listening today, guys, and hope you stuck with us all this way, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, where we talk about low-level drills and fundamental movements.
Indeed, and probably a ton of other bullshit as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
See you later.
See you later, mate.